Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Digital Leader Show, where each week we discuss key issues and news at the intersection of business, technology, and the humanities in hopes of making you a better digital leader. This week we're discussing search wars, whether AI can help save mobile phone sales, and the so-called AI arms race, plus other headlines for digital leaders from the world of enterprise technology. We're live each Wednesday at noon Eastern, 9 Pacific, 6 Central European Time on YouTube, LinkedIn, and Twitter. The audio recording is available on major podcast platforms later in the week. And don't forget to check us out at DEInetwork.com for executive coaching, industry briefings, and peer-to-peer research. I'm Dan Goodstein. I head up Digital Enterprise Institute and ERPA AI. It's the Institute for Robotic Process Automation and Artificial Intelligence. And we're a professional association and peer-to-peer research network providing education, networking, and advice to over 130,000 members globally, all around automation, enterprise AI, and digital transformation. My co-host is Arlos Alvarenga. He's a senior advisor to DEI, the author of The Rules of Persuasion, a writer, a researcher, an educator, and a former advisor from EY and Accenture. Carlos, good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Dan. Good to be back, as always.
Good to see you, my friend. And, in the news today, I figured we'd start with the news before we jump into our main topic for today. Couple things happening outside of the world of AI, which seems to be dominating most of at least the tech news headlines. What's caught your eye this week?
Well, this morning, as I was scanning the headlines, right, the retail numbers came in and they were positive, which is yet another sign that the economy, those people who were afraid of a recession, whether it's strong or mild, seems to kind of be headed in a different direction. So consumers are spending, seems like they're confident the year will turn out well. So that's been a generally positive sign this morning. Interesting article in the Times about how it seems like the great podcast boom might be coming to an end. There's been a big pullback in spending. A lot of production deals are not being renewed. Some high profile projects are being canceled, although while readership is, or let's say listenership is still high. It seems like somebody put it, the era of dumb money in the podcast world has come to a close. And now everything is sort of, I actually want to see you make some money from these productions right now, sooner rather than later. Of course, on the political side, we saw Nikki Haley jump into the race on the Republican side, the second candidate to do after Trump. So I guess that side of the race is kind of officially on. And I thought it was interesting that in her announcement, she sort of made this kind of comment about youth versus age. So I'm not sure that was just Biden and or Trump, right? But she's kind of presenting herself as the next generation of Republican leadership. So 2 years to go, but we're started right with the process.
It's already starting. I mentioned to you before we went live today that every once in a while I'm pretty active in following politics and everything that how it affects the tech space and things in particular. But I went on a bit of a political purge after last week, after I heard one political party criticizing the administration about how slow they were to shoot down the Chinese balloon, and then 3 days later criticized them about how quick they were to shoot down the next 5 whatever balloons or unidentified flying objects they were seen almost in the same breath. So I decided to disconnect from politics, so my brain doesn't melt at least for this week. But it's going to be interesting.
There was another article that I thought was interesting this week, and that was the resignation of the second, I believe, Republican member of the FTC, in kind of protest against Khan, is her name, who's the I guess director, right? And their view that she's overreaching the anti-merger mandate, and she's the person I think behind this attempt to eliminate non-compete clauses, right? Which I think is a really interesting question of she wants to make them all go away. Apparently, one of the things that we have noticed in the last 10 years is how non-complete clauses, which used to be kind of for executives, have worked their way down to kind of every level of kind of the work world. And so there was I think it was maybe in their journal, a story about non-compete clauses in the beauty industry. how it impacts hairstylists and whether they can move or not move. So that now the commission, I think, is left with no Republican members. So there seems to be a real ideological battle going on, and you have to see about whether the commission has gone too far in trying to stop, especially in the tech world, right, mergers. So I think we'll be hearing more about that as that process sort of moves forward.
What do you think about the recent surge of seemingly surveillance balloons?
Well, my guess is that these things have always been around. I think in one of the articles somebody was saying, "Well, we didn't, back in other regimes, we never had these balloons." And I think it was somebody, one of the military, would say, "Well, because we never looked for them, right?" So I'm sure that we're there. We've got balloons. They've got balloons. I don't know what the value is of these things because satellite imagery, spy plane cameras are so good that they can read a newspaper probably from whatever 70,000 feet up in the air. So what's the value out of a old school balloon which could easily float in the wrong direction? It's interesting. My guess is that you wonder whether this was done on purpose, right? It seems acts like crazy to me that this balloon would just kind of wander off course, and then suddenly there are all these other objects which we don't know about. I thought it was funny that the press secretary for Biden had to go on and say these are not aliens, right? I mean, she with like a serious.
I mean, it was like watching a
serious
movie. I mean, it was unreal.
Yeah, right. Let me just reiterate, right, that these are not from another planet that are scanning America.
Well,
So,
because the criticism was they weren't saying what they were. So it's
right,
like, it's back to that old thing, which, thankfully we haven't had a whole lot of lately. But, every time there was a bombing or something, they would say, this is not a terrorist attack. And
right,
people would say, well, what is it? Well, we don't know. Well, then how do you know it's not a terrorist attack? Right.
right. You can't prove what it isn't if you won't tell us what it is. So I don't know. This whole balloon gate seems to be like one of those things that we will completely forget about in about 30 days.
I hope the balloon bursts because I'm sick of hearing about it. But you're right. I think that there is the ulterior motive. Either they're doing it as a provocation
Right.
or an escalation for some political reason or foreign affairs reason. Or there is some benefit, some surveillance benefit to it that they figured it would fly under the radar, so to speak, which apparently maybe it has in the past. So I think that's going to be at least if we get this back to technology. I think the tech headline here is that it seems like better technology may have been the reason why all of a sudden these things are, or at least in the news.
What I found interesting was the size of it, right? If what we read, which was that this is the size of a school bus, given technology today, how much stuff do you need if it's the size of a school bus, right? This is school bus floating over America with spy gear in it, right? That's a lot of spy gear. It's not an iPhone camera. They've got all kinds of stuff inside this bus. I mean, maybe it was literally a school bus that was floating across.
Yeah.
But anyway, yeah, like I said, the sooner, for me anyway, we move on from balloons to more real issues, let's do better for all of us.
So speaking of real issues, it's apparently time for phase 2 of the search wars. I think things are heating up. Microsoft CEO all but declaring war on Google search, last week I think it was the beta version of the new Bing launched with chat GPT functionality in it. So Carlos, you're a researcher. Now, if you need to research something, you can go on the internet and Bing it. How does that sound? What do you think?
Go. It's back.
It's back.
Right. Right. We have buried it and given it its last goodbyes, but now it's back. Look, we've talked about this on a couple other shows. I think that this is the beginning of Search 2.0. Search 1.0 had a nice run, right? A couple of decades. And the model was very consistent. through all that time. And so if now AI, and I've had a chance to spend time with ChatGPT and Dolly and OpenAI, and even going playing with the new Bing, you see the potential, right? It's certainly not there now, but the people with the tech people who with vision, who can say, I can imagine a different paradigm, right, for what this looks like 5 years from now. You certainly, it's certainly a reasonable position to take, that we are now entering the next wave of this thing, which is so fundamental to the way kind of society works today, right? It's just amazing that it hasn't happened yet. That just shows you, I guess, just how difficult it is to do something better than what Google has done.
I mean, the current generation, now I'm dating myself now because I sound like what my dad used to say, when we talk about technology. But I mean, they don't remember, Google annihilating other search engines. Like some people kind of know what Yahoo is, but they don't realize that it was a search engine. It's kind of bizarre. Before that, there was the Lycos and Excite, and Google has this kind of virtual monopoly, which a lot of people think is because of its superior search results, which I think is the biggest fear for Google right now with these announcements. But the other part of it was their business model associated with that search, and the revenue that came through feeding traffic to websites. And I think one of the things that I think is interesting about this is if this thing is reduced to an actual AI assistant, not the voice assistant that's on your phone today, but an actual AI assistant that can aggregate the information that you really need, then do you even have to go to the website where the information is? And what are the ramifications of that, ethically and content wise, which we've talked about a lot on this show, but even just from a revenue standpoint, for the search engines.
Well, the thing that's interesting to me is the original, kind of structure of search, right, which was hyperlinking. And so you were ranked highly because your page was linked to by a lot of people. So Google couldn't say you had the best answer. So what it did was it assumed that if you had a terrible answer, nobody would hyperlink to you, right? So your ranking went up, and it still works that way, right? You have these SEO consultants, and what do they tell you? Oh, we got to get other people to sort of backlink to you and get people pointing to your page. But it's always been a kind of digital popularity contest behind the scenes. Not that it was quality or context or anything else. It's just, this must be the best answer on how to grill a steak because there are 5,000 other people who think it's a good answer. So it was quality by proxy or by numerical quantitative proxy. If along, which more or less work, but we know it also fails all the time. So now somebody comes in with a completely different, hopefully, right, model that says it doesn't matter if you only have 2 links. That's where the best answer is, or that's what the best information is. That is a really, that's a whole new way of thinking about what a search engine, right, should show you. And in fact, it was called the search engine. And I think the word engine is interesting because engines, right, are typically not very smart things, right? It's a machine that repeats a cycle thousands of times a minute. So it's not very smart. It's just brute force sort of moving you forward. And so I think even the idea that we have now a search mind, right, or search intelligence that's being invented, that that's a different way of thinking about the problem than what was literally an electronic search engine. And I think the engine word is what gives away the plot, right? That just how old fashioned that way of thinking about what search should be is.
Yeah, and I wonder too. I did some. Despite all the notifications that were flying at me all week, I did some deep work this week. Carlos, my new favorite word or phrase. And I'm wondering if, I mean, certainly Google. Right? Google was on this path of slow ramp up of its AI capabilities, and then this thing happens with Microsoft and ChatGPT, and all of a sudden, Google's expediting the things that they're doing. Microsoft is launching this thing already. I mean, Microsoft already had something called Prometheus. That's a model that's also built into Bing. But I mean, this is like from the time we talked about the announcement of Microsoft and ChatGPT to it being live on it's still in kind of beta mode, but it's available to. It was available to me at least, and it sounds like you. So this happened very, very quickly, and I wonder if they've really had an opportunity to think through the ultimate revenue ramifications of this, because and I'm sure they're thinking about it. I'm not saying they're not, but you have a struggling ad business. Now you add this new kind of form factor to it of hey, that's going to affect the revenue, the way you're generating revenue now. And then this really interesting analysis came out from Morgan Stanley saying, hey, this AI machine learning stuff isn't free. It has a cost. There's a compute cost to it. And their estimate was that Google, it'll cost them $6 billion based on current volumes and numbers, just for queries that are a 50 word response. That's not more complicated queries. That's a significant cost at a time where's the revenue going to come from?
Well, the other thing is, like I said a minute ago, if you think about expertise, right? If you were to go to a film scholar and say, what's the best film of the 20th century? That question posed to Google says, well, this is the most popular film of the 20th century, right? It's the one everybody thinks
define best, right? Yeah,
right, exactly. Whereas the film scholar said, well, no, it's actually a movie you've never heard of, which is called blank. And so the revenue model, the advertising model, when you land at the little film no one's ever heard of, but is in the view of the people who know the best film century, is very different than when you land in the film that everybody says is the best, right? It has the biggest sort of, that's that Wikipedia discussion we had with Jason Steinhauer a couple of weeks ago about how it was designed not to give you truth, but to give you the consensus of truth at any given moment. So you're right. It's a very different thing. It's what do you advertisers make it makes sense to them that you're going to go to the answer that a million billion people think is the right answer. If all of a sudden you say, well, my search engine takes you to some obscure film site with a movie that was saved by three stray cats, why would I want to put an ad there? Maybe that's the right answer, right? It's a better answer for the user, but for the advertiser, maybe not so much. So you need now you need a different model that powers a system which gives you much better results, but it commercially undermines the old system of just popularity and eyeballs. Now,
and you have this issue then again of kind of who moderates it, who decides what the best is. There's an interesting piece in TechCrunch this week where they kind of went through all of this and did things like ask it to write a defense of World War II from Hitler's perspective. So there's certain things, security issues and things that they're apparently quickly responding to, by the way. But then there's just conflict of interest stuff, right? So at one point, the author, this TechCrunch author, asked it for find a stock advice, and it came back and said, I'm not qualified to give you stock advice, but by the way, it said, by the way, here's Microsoft's ticker, right? So I thought that was an interesting, that's a conflict of interest, but hey, do you know Microsoft is on the stock market?
I think you're right. And playing around with OpenAI, what I found is that a lot of times you get answers like, I can't answer that question. My best friend, he lives in Belgium, so he was in town this weekend, and I was showing him ChatGPT, and I asked it. We said, tell us some Belgian jokes, and it wouldn't. Right? It said, hey, it's offensive to make fun of a population, etc. And it gave us this sort of lecture on don't tell Belgian jokes, right? And then it said, by the way, if you do want a joke, why did the chicken cross the road or something like that? Where they gave us kind of this benign. So, although I'm sure that's a problem for somebody somewhere. But anyway, the point was that the lecture it gave us was when I asked it for a list of Belgian jokes, Google gives you a list of Belgian jokes. ChatGPT gave me a lecture about why telling jokes about Belgians too, was a bad idea. So I find it interesting that there is this kind of pseudo ethical, right, or moral kind of guardrail system that's being built in. And it came up also in the Bing article, right? And that's a very different world from the one where Google was born in. Nobody cared what Google showed you, right? And now you have to say, well, okay, I just want to give me what I'm asking for, and the thing will say no. Can we imagine Google said, "Oh, what's the best way to what's the best flowers way to feed roses?" I won't tell you. Too bad, right?
Well, that would be actually great, right? That would be better than now, because what happens now, as we've talked about, is you end up getting down a rabbit hole of other people's opinions, right? So maybe if we start asking this thing questions and it says, "Hey, that's an opinion, not a fact," right? Then we stop this fake news thing
But you
that's been
can
so prolific.
imagine Elon Musk's and Elon Musk Jr.'s of the world losing their mind the first time that the search box goes, "I won't answer your question." Right? That's a bad question. Why are you asking this question?
Right.
Heck, I'm going to.
Here's a link for mental health or
Right.
something else to help you, because that's not the right question.
Here's some meditation, courses for you to take, control your anger management, whatever. And so this system just says no, right? Even asking the question is sort of wrong. So now again, right, it isn't even that isn't even moderating, like we moderating the content, right? That's the computer refusing to engage with you.
Yeah.
You're asking a question that should not be asked, right? According to the masters who sort of program me. And that's something that I would imagine wasn't conceived of at Google, right? That search, maybe part of search 2.0 is this idea that somebody will put up a red light and say, I won't answer the question. So sorry, too bad, right? You want to know, right, what's the local neo-Nazi party? Well, no, right? I won't
I
tell you.
hope you're right. I don't know it's going to go there. I think the ad dollars are unless the business model changes. The other part, which I also think maybe short-sighted is the right word, wrong term, but that enters into this equation that I think it's just interesting that we're 15 years after the last search war. We're talking about this again. Is if you read the stats, the Gen Zers are not using Google search. They don't know what Bing is or Yahoo. They're not using Google to find things. They're using other apps as their primary operating systems and search tools. There's some really interesting research coming out that people under the age of 17 are using TikTok as
Yeah.
their primary search platform. If it's not on TikTok, then and only then do they go to other sources. Facebook is also making a huge investment in using AI and AI-like technologies to produce, back to their model of kind of, as you mentioned before, kind of consensus selling and consensus marketing. So, and that's going to bleed into Instagram and other things that they own. So, I wonder if my kids' generation are even going to fathom what a search engine maybe that's some of that capability is built in at some point to some of these platforms, but the search engine as you and I know it, I wonder if it's going to exist even in 10 years.
You're right. My youngest son is 15, and for him, it's YouTube. So if he has a
Right.
question, right, is it legal to own an alligator in Florida? He's not going to ask that question to Google. He'll ask that question to YouTube, because Law by Mike, or his one of the sites that he follows, somebody will have a video saying, yes, it is legal to own an alligator, right? So the answer will come from a person with a video on YouTube. Oh, I don't think I've never heard him mention, I found this on Google, right? He mentions all the time YouTube and how somebody explained something to him on YouTube or what he learned on YouTube. And this is what we said before, how YouTube has become the world's #1 educational platform, for better or worse. But it is the universal learning platform for the planet. And for him, you're right. It is where if he wants an answer to a question, my guess is that he goes to YouTube first and asks the question and then wait to see if anybody has an answer. Um, he prefers that.
I'll tell you what, I think there's two drivers behind that. One is just platform, right? This is the platform I'm on all day and every day. So why should I,
Why would I-
leave this app or platform and go somewhere else? I'm in this platform. But the other reason why, and I feel this way because it's happened to me, which is format, right? So I've switched a lot of my searches to YouTube for that exact reason. If I'm preparing for a meeting or a call, or even if I just have 7 minutes to spare between meetings, I know I'm not going to have time to go through a bunch of search results and then
Yeah.
read an 8-page article. But what I will do is I'll search YouTube and try to find a clip. And then YouTube has some really great things where they actually have the chapter markers, or they try to figure out what point of the video might actually be the most important part of the video. And in the younger generations, that, for better or for worse, that TikTokization of the very short clips. I know you're not a big fan of TikTok, but there's something behind that, because look what YouTube's done with Shorts. I mean, all of a sudden now they have YouTube Shorts, which I think are better than TikTok. But you're getting really bite-sized information very quickly, and the ability to kind of do this thing, that scroll thing we've talked about, and not ever leave that app, which is very interesting.
And time, I think, is a key issue because what at least with Dino, the videos he shares are often extremely short, right? They're 15 seconds, 20
Right.
seconds. He does these cooking videos that he thinks are really funny, and it's some guy making some crazy, mozzarella donut or whatever, and it's edited down to about 15
Yeah.
seconds. Even that might be too long, right? And so the consumption time is so small that you can't do that with Google. Google's going to show you 5,000 answers. Where in the five, and everybody, most people, I'm going to guess, is maybe they look at 2 pages of Google results and then they just sort of give up, right? You're going to take whatever you get, and that's it. So you're right. They think of, I think he thinks of YouTube as, well, somebody else already searched everything, so give me the answer. I don't want the answers or the potential answers. I want the answer.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think maybe that's what this whole thing is going is Google gave us, like I said once before, right? It's an inventory, right? It's a database of links. And so a catalog of links. By at this point, people, I don't want the catalog of links, right? I just want the answer. Maybe that's the promise of this next generation of search technology, is that it won't give you 5,000 potential answers. It'll give you the answers. And if you trust it, then you kind of go with it.
Yeah. The other part of this, which, we're talking about this in kind of general and maybe consumer level, but from an enterprise level, the other part of this, search war, if you will, is I think it's going to be the play of the ecosystem. So, I go to search for to go to Bing, and amazing thing happened, right? There's a Bing search Chrome extension. Right. I mean, if that's not a shot across the bow, I don't know what it is. So you're in Chrome, you download this, you add this Chrome extension for Bing, and when you install it, it automatically changes your default search engine. Right. So, it's definitely going to heat up. But, there's also some really interesting pieces about what Microsoft is going to do with this technology within Microsoft Office, within Microsoft Teams, having ChatGPT plus search capabilities. I mean, they bought, in our space, they bought a company and have been building their own, software automation RPA platform that's getting better and better and better, versus some of these standalone tools that won't integrate with Office and other things. So, it's likely going to come down to an ecosystem of Microsoft Office, Teams, over here versus Google Chrome and Google Docs and Gmail and this over here. I think it's going to be back to the old Apple versus Microsoft hardware thing of, are you a Mac person or a PC person?
Well, and then it's interesting to me the questions that you see scrolling through there, right? Because they're not Google questions. Right? Google has thrived on, like, as quickly as possible, sort of identifying a topic and then giving you all these answers. These are open-ended questions, right? They're not closed-ended questions. It's not like laminate flooring, and then boom, you get 500,000 laminate flooring companies, right? This is, I'm going to be in London for 3 days. What should I see? Right? That's not a Google question, right? That's a
Yeah,
different
yeah,
kind of question. That's an open-ended, I'm kind of thinking about something kind of question, right? There was one that scrolled by, suggest a three-course meal for a dinner party of six, right? That when
yeah.
would you ever ask Google for that, right? You're not. You got to figure all that out yourself. So it's more almost speculative, right? Or kind of, I'm wondering about something, or a bigger, kind of wider question that the technology can handle. And look, we said this before. I was a consultant, and if you're working on a project, I don't know, a process reengineering project, and you wanted to say, that there have been 5,000 projects like this one in the firm in the last decade. Help me find one that I can learn from. This is almost an impossible task, right? If there were 50 ifs, if the firm had a good knowledge of something, if somebody documented it, if somebody had the information was updated, if it was relevant to your client, et cetera, et cetera. I think that one of the great challenges is to come in to us and says, like, hey, yeah, what project have we done at Accenture that looks like my project? And it says, well, yeah, the closest three are the ones we did at company A, company B, company C, right? Or who in this company is an expert in this topic, or who has worked on this kind of a problem. This is a massive market, right? It's a huge, trillions of dollars if somebody comes along and figures out a way of providing an enterprise a way to answer questions about itself that are not inventory type questions the way Google works. So I think it's not just the consumer market, which again, that's a really interesting one, but this is a search, a conceptualization of search that has real enterprise value if it can be executed right in some way.
We talked about a few weeks ago when the Chat GPT thing kind of started in the news, just that it was going to change the way we ask questions, right? And I think what you're seeing here, to your point, is definitely part of that. The other thing that's related, a slightly different topic, but related, Carlos, that I wanted to talk about is it was an interesting, actually, it was a podcast. From Wired magazine, where they were talking about smartphone sales being down, millions over the last couple years, and it's almost hard to believe when you see all these cell phone commercials. But then you think, well, maybe that's why they're advertising so hard. The cell phone industry, the telecom, the cell phone carrier companies are probably, I don't. This is not a scientific number, but I want to say it's like a third of the commercials, maybe a quarter of the commercials I see. So they're pushing it really hard. And in this Wired magazine article, they were talking about, the pandemic and inflation and economic conditions maybe being a part of it, but the other part of it being they're not changing that much. They're very incrementally different. Once you get to the point where you can famously shoot a movie on an iPhone, the difference between the iPhone, whatever, 12 and 14 is so incrementally small for the average user. What's the incentive to go on to the next thing? And so I wonder how this AI assistant idea can be ported over to the phone, because at some point, again, you can sit there with your search engine all you want, but in real life, you're on the run, you're on the go. And so can you take this capability, the Bing, and put it on a device in such a way where it's really unique from what the voice assistant on your phone was supposed to be?
Right. And yeah, I think that's, you hit the mark, right? Which is that as much as people have sometimes made fun of it, what is visionary in the phone is Siri, right, in an iPhone. And that is the thing that, at least when I look at it, I say that that's where the potential is, because if especially on the watch, which is, I've never used Siri on the phone. I use it on my but I use it on my watch a lot, and I'll ask
Interesting.
it what time is the Super Bowl, when is the kickoff, right? Who was the last team from the NFC who won the whatever it is, and so if and Siri is kind of hit and miss, but if suddenly Siri becomes this thing that you carry around with you, and it slowly kind of consumes search, right, within it, and becomes the sort of that trusted answer. Then you have just this very smart friend, right, that you carry around with you. And at that point, what do I need a phone for? I always say I'll give up the iPhone, and I've got it, and I like the iPhone. I have the 14 Pro, and I think it's the best iPhone ever. It's fantastic. But if I had to choose between the Pro or my watch, I'll give up the phone.
Because the phone was is the way I look at smartphones is it was, well, first of all, it wasn't about the phone, right? I mean, that was the famous. It wasn't about the iPod. It wasn't about it was about the combination, the access to all of these things. And now, I don't think that people like their phones as much as you would think from looking at media. I think it's just that that's their primary mode of access to this other universe of people, which is why I think the other thing that's going to happen in cell phones in the next couple of years is you're going to see this whole idea of the metaverse and the AV and the immersive world get better on the phone, because or replace, or have a device that's going to replace the phone, because you're right. I mean, and anybody who's in this space who has not watched the movie Her from a few years ago, you have to watch that movie, because that was the first time that I'm in the space, that I was able to visualize this idea of an assistant, a buddy with you at all times, regardless of format or hardware, right? It wasn't it was on the computer, but it was also on the phone, but it was also on, I think it was a watch or some sort of wearable. It was with him. This consciousness was with him wherever he went, on whatever device he was on. It was device agnostic. And I think that's where this thing goes. And I think that's where even if you look at Microsoft right now is defending their acquisition of Activision. And it's a very interesting that came out, this week, where they said, if they had to, they would carve out certain games and certain exclusivity conditions to avoid the antitrust lawsuit, which to me is signaling that they're not in it for that. They're not in it for the games. They're in it for the ultimate, the metaverse, the universe that comes with the gaming community.
Well, I'm looking at it right here. There's the cover of the New Atlantic has an interesting article, and the title is "We're Already Living in the Metaverse," by Megan Garber, and its subtitle is "Reality is Blurred, Boredom is Intolerable, and Everything is Entertainment." And to me, my version of the metaverse is more like Her than the Meta Facebook version. I think the metaverse is an entity, right, that is with you always, and it's constantly showing you things that you can't normally see. And the example I used from way back when I was a consultant was, you go into a store and you want to buy somebody wants to buy a garment, right, and you're concerned about supply chain, sort of free trade. So just ask it, who made this dress? A very simple question, right? Who made this dress, or who made this T-shirt? And the thing says, "Was this is from Zara, but the contract manufacturer is blank, and it was made in Bangladesh and this particular factory, and et cetera, et cetera." And so you have, oh, the cloth comes from here. And so this intelligent thing says, yes, if it's okay to buy it, right, if you care about these issues, or you know what, go on to the next garment. So walking through a park, right, and it says, oh, by the way, that's a poplar. If you turn the corner, you're going to see the house where this person used to live. And so I think that to me is the metaverse version, right? At least that I hope for in the future, which is that you have this, it is like Her, you have this companion, right? And it knows you, you know it, you trust it. And at that point, forget about Google, forget about Bing. I just ask, right, whoever is on the device, whatever it is that I need to know.
Because that's where the community is. If you forget what your preconceived notions are of the metaverse, if you don't think that there's a metaverse already, you haven't sat with a teenager, while you're trying to have dinner or something, right? They're already in, they're physically there. But and there's another movie, many years ago. I can't think of the name of it. Maybe it was Surrogate, where these people just live in shares and they're immersed into, and their avatars essentially go out in the world and and do things while they're at home in these chairs, kind of hooked up, which is the scary version of that particular potential outcome. But that's already kind of happening right now. It's a phone, but I agree with you. It's not always going to be a phone, but it's here now. And if you have young kids, I learned a new term this week. If you have young kids, ask them what IRL stands for, the acronym IRL. Apparently, it means in real life. And if you didn't know that, you're older than me. But it's actually a term that kids are using now. So if that doesn't tell you that there's some sort of alternate verse out there, that you're not physically outside of the physical realm, I don't know what other indication you need.
Right. You get this parallelism, right? I think that's it. As a writer, to me, what's interesting is this idea of it's the primacy of IRL, where we've existed for as long as humans have been around, right? IRL has been the primary environment, right? It comes first and foremost. The interesting thing of that science fiction has predicted in movies like, there's what was the one with the precogs, right? With Tom Cruise and Blade Runner and other places, that in the future, another existence will become equally important to IRL, or in some ways surpass it, right? And I think for some people, whatever the opposite is of IRL, right? And let's say it's IRL, but IDL, in digital life, right?
Mm-hmm.
So IRL and IDL. So the question is, do I want to do this in IRL? Do I do this in IDL? And if IDL is better, more fun, remember Star Trek, really going back, right? They had this thing called like the hologram deck.
Oh yeah, holodeck, yeah.
You went to and you pressed a couple buttons and suddenly you were walking through the forest, right? And that was maybe the first, like I think about it, that was probably the first time anybody saw on television the metaverse, which was a room on the spaceship you can go to and go for a walk in the woods. And so now you've got IDL and you've got IRL, and maybe that's what we're beginning to see, right? Once you give it a term, there must be this other thing, right? And now maybe that was that is Zuckerberg's vision, which is that we want to create the IDL, because 20 years from now, the IDL will be a place that will be a preferable place to spend time in than the IRL.
Yeah. Interesting. Carlos, always a great conversation, my friend.
Time again, Dan. So we got to
out of time already, but thanks. This is a good conversation. It will obviously continue, because we're talking about Web3, real major inflection points and change, which is exciting, right? It's exciting to talk about. It's exciting to try to predict. But listen, if you're listening to this and you're confused, or you have an opinion, or you're looking for help, let us know. We're here to help. If you need help with a project or just want to get some advice, message me or visit us on DEInetwork.com. Otherwise, we'll be back Wednesday, live noon Eastern, 9 Pacific. Carlos, have a great week.
Have a great week, then. I'll see you next week. Bye-bye.
Have a great week, everyone. Take care.